The mid-budget film is dead. This is not a contested claim. It is the settled consensus of the film industry, entertainment journalism, and a substantial portion of the directorial class. Steven Soderbergh has said it. Steven Spielberg has said it. A24 built an entire corporate identity around the implication of it. The death of the mid-budget film is at this point a genre of discourse rather than a finding. What is contested is the diagnosis, and the diagnosis, in the overwhelmingly majority of cases, is wrong. The standard account runs as follows. The rise of the blockbuster franchise economy, driven by Marvel and its imitators, crowded out the mid-range studio picture. Executives, incentivized by the outsized returns of intellectual property with proven audience demand, reallocated production budgets towards tentpoles. The mid-budget film, the $20 to $60 million drama, thriller, or adult comedy that once constituted the backbone of the studio slate, was starved of capital. It did not fail, it was defunded, and with it, so the argument goes, a certain kind of cinema perished. This account is not entirely inaccurate. The blockbuster did crowd out the mid-budget film at the theatrical level, but this is a description of mechanism, not cause. It explains how the mid-budget film was displaced from a particular distribution channel. It does not explain why the displacement was permanent. It does not explain why audiences did not protest the loss. It does not explain why the talent that once made those films did not mount a sustained effort to revive them. The reason those questions go unanswered is that the standard account is built around the wrong unit of analysis. It treats the mid-budget film as a product. It asks why the product disappeared from shelves. What it does not ask is what problem the product was solving for the consumer who purchased it. When you ask that question, the answer to everything else becomes obvious. This program was made possible in part by contributions to your Art Economist from viewers like you. Thank you. Before making the argument, it is worth stating it plainly so that the structure is visible throughout. The mid-budget film did not die, it was obsoleted. There is a difference. A product that dies fails to satisfy its market. A product that is obsoleted is replaced by a superior solution to the same underlying consumer problem. The mid-budget film falls into the second category, and that distinction matters for every conclusion that follows. The argument proceeds in 3 steps. First, the theater was always a structurally hostile distribution channel for the mid-budget film. The format was as never secure as its cultural prominence implied. Second, television, for most of the period in which the mid-budget film flourished, was not a viable substitute for serious adult storytelling. It was, in a precise and important sense, not competition. Third, prestige television emerged as exactly that rival. It solved the same consumer problem that mid-budget films had been solving, and solved it better. Which leads to the conclusion that the question itself is malformed. Why don't studios make smaller movies anymore is the wrong question, asked of the wrong party, resting on a false premise on what the audience actually lost. The audience did not leave, they simply followed the content, and the content went to television. The theatrical exhibition model has one economic feature that distinguishes it from nearly every other entertainment distribution channel: uniform pricing. Every film, regardless of production budget, marketing expenditure, or anticipated audience size, is sold to the consumer at approximately the same ticket price. This is not incidental, this is structural. Studios and exhibitors have periodically floated the idea of variable pricing, charging more for event films, less for smaller pictures, and have been rejected each time, largely by exhibitors who depend on the social contract of the uniform ticket price to maintain cinema as a mass audience institution rather than a tiered luxury good. The uniform price held because of that. And its consequences for the mid-budget film were straightforward and brutal. In a uniform price environment, the product that wins, the product that most completely justifies the cost of leaving the house and going to the movie theater. A $200 million Marvel film and a $40 million drama are competing for the same seat at the same price. The blockbuster is purpose-built to win that competition. Scale, spectacle, sound design that requires a theater to fully realize. The mid-budget drama is not. Its primary value, character, dialogue, and thematic complexibility, is captured as a fully on a moderately well-equipped home television as it is in a multiplex. The mid-budget film, therefore, was dependent on a consumer commitment that was always somewhat irrational from a cost-benefit standpoint. It required audiences to choose theatrical exhibition for a product that did not maximally benefit from theatrical exhibition on the sole grounds that that theatrical exhibition was the only available high-quality delivery mechanism for serious narrative content. That commitment held for as long as that alternative was network television. The moment a superior delivery mechanism emerged, the rational calculation shifted. The theater did not kill the mid-budget film, the theater was always a mid-budget film's structural weakness. What changed was that the weakness was finally exposed. To understand why the mid-budget film held its audience for as long as it did, you have to understand what television was in the period of the mid-budget film's commercial viability. And the answer was that, like I previously said, it was not competition, not in any meaningful sense. In 1990, telling a serious filmgoer to just watch TV was a real insult with real content behind it. Network television in that era was defined by a structural constraint that made continuous novelistic storytelling essentially impossible: the episodic reset. Characters cannot change in ways that carried across episodes because the broadcast model assumed that viewers might enter any given episode without prior context. This was not a creative failure on the part of the people making the television, it was a rational response to the distribution architecture of mid-century American broadcasting. The result was a medium that produced competent entertainment, procedural drama, situation comedy, variety programming, but could not produce the sustained character development that serious narrative requires. What this meant for the mid-budget film was simple. The adult consumer who wanted serious storytelling had no viable substitute. The theater was the only venue. Television, operating under the episodic reset constraint and organized around advertiser relationships rather than subscriber/consumer relationships, could not offer what serious film could offer, and so the mid-budget film had the lane to itself. That ended with The Sopranos in 1999. The Sopranos premiered on January 10th, 1999. The argument here is not that David Chase invented prestige television through sheer creative force of will. The argument is structural. The premium cable model, HBO operating outside the advertiser-dependent broadcast ecosystem, generating revenue through subscription rather than ratings, removed the episodic reset constraints. It could build stories across episodes, across seasons, across years, with shows like Oz. It could change characters, it could let consequences accumulate. It could do across 80 hours what mid-budget films had been doing in 2. And the critical point is that The Sopranos was not better at mid-budget film than what mid-budget film did. It was a different category of thing entirely. Tony Soprano is not a character that a film could adequately contain. The psychology, the relationships, the slow corruption across 6 seasons requires duration. The film version of The Sopranos, had it existed, would have been a competent crime drama. The television version is something that the film medium structurally cannot produce. What followed across the next decade was not a gradual improvement in television quality, it was a categorical transformation in what the medium was understood to be capable of. The Wire, The Shield, Deadwood, 6 Feet Under, Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, Battlestar Galactica, Mad Men, Snowfall, and so on and so forth. Each of these programs addressed the exact consumer who had previously gone to the theater for mid-budget drama. Each of them solved the same problem with structural advantages that film did not possess. The talent then followed. This is the predictable consequence of a new format demonstrating superior capability. Writers who had fought for theatrical green lights were now writing pilot scripts. Actors who had treated television as a career endpoint were treating it as a career peak. Directors were developing limited series. The migration was not uniform and it was not overnight, but its direction was unmistakable, and by the early 2010s it was complete. The cultural prestige of the two formats had flipped entirely within a single decade. The death of the mid-budget film is commonly described as a single displacement effect. The blockbuster credited out. This is, at best, a partial account. What actually occurred was a 3-front displacement that left the format with no viable position remaining in the market structure. From above, the blockbuster franchise economy did what the standard account describes. The theatrical exhibition channel, already structurally biased towards spectacle through its uniform price model, became progressively dominated by a small number of franchise properties with pre-established audience demand and the marketing infrastructure to guarantee an opening weekend floor. The economics of theatrical distribution, front-loaded revenue, opening weekend box office as the primary commercial signal, exhibitor pressure to maximize screen allocation to highest demand titles, pushed the mid-budget film out of the channel. This was real, but this was not the decisive endpoint. From below, the micro-budget independent sector absorbed the low end of what had been the mid-budget range. The democratization of production technology, the digital camera, the nonlinear editing suite, the collapse of post-production costs made it commercially viable to film possible budgets that would have been inadequate for professional production a decade earlier. The festival circuit, the art house distributor, and eventually the streaming acquisition proved the distribution infrastructure for films that did not require theatrical exhibition to reach their audience. The $5 to $15 million serious film found the path outside of the studio system. From the side, and this is the decisive front, prestige television captured the audience. Not the production capability or the distribution channel, the audience. The specific consumer who wanted adult, character-driven, thematically serious storytelling had, by the mid-2010s, a better option than the mid-budget film on every dimension that mattered to them. The theatrical channel for that audience did not contract because of supply failure, it contracted because demand migrated to a superior solution. The mid-budget film did not lose one fight, it simply lost three, simultaneously, from three different directions, which is actually quite the complicated way to lose a fight. Joseph Schumpeter's concept of creative destruction is invoked frequently enough in discussions of technological change that it has lost much of its precision. It is worth restating the core mechanism because the mid-budget film is nearly a perfect illustration of it. Schumpeter argued that capitalist development proceeds not through the gradual improvement of existing products, but through the continuous replacement of existing products by new ones that solve the same underlying consumer problem more effectively. The old product does not merely decline, it is rendered obsolete. The key phrase here is the same underlying consumer problem. Creative destruction is not the replacement of one product with a different product serving a different need. It is the replacement of one solution with a superior solution to the same problem. The mid-budget film existed to solve a specific problem, to deliver adult, character-driven storytelling to an audience that wanted more than spectacle. Prestige television exists to solve the same problem. It solves it with more runtime, no opening weekend death clock, more structural capacity for character development, better ROI for the distributor, and lower cost and higher convenience for the consumer. On every axis relying to the underlying problem, Prestige TV is the superior solution. The consumer did not have a mid-budget film problem, they had a good stories problem. Prestige television solved it, and once it was solved, once the consumer had a better option, the previous solution became unnecessary. This is what Joseph described. The mid-budget film was not murdered by the franchise economy, it was replaced by a superior solution to the same consumer need. These are categorically different events, and treating them as equivalent produces categorically wrong conclusions about what, if anything, should be done in response. The discourse about the death of the mid-budget film is, in its overwhelming majority, supply-side nostalgia dressed as consumer advocacy. This is worth stating plainly because the emotional register of the discourse tends to obscure it. The directors, critics, and industry figures who most loudly mourn the mid-budget film are, in the great majority of cases, people who built their professional identities in that format. Their careers were developed within it. Their artistic sensibilities were formed by it. Their sense of what cinema is capable of was established by it. The lament is not dishonest. It is, as a description of personal and professional loss, entirely legitimate. But it is not a description of what happened to the consumer. The audience did not mourn. They migrated without grief. The adult viewer who had gone to see mid-budget dramas in the 1990s did not stop watching narrative fiction. They started watching Succession, Severance, The Americans, Snowfall. They received more of what they actually wanted. Hours, character development, accumulated consequence. They had more of that than the mid-budget film format had been able to provide. There was no loss of access to serious storytelling. There was an improvement in the terms on which it was available. Asking studios to resurrect the mid-budget film is, therefore, asking them to reinvent a solved problem. It is asking them to invest in competing against the superior product for an audience that has already migrated and shows no evidence of wishing to return. From the perspective of the studio as a firm, this is an instruction to allocate capital to a structurally losing position. The studios that decline to do so are not failing the culture, they are reading the market. The consumer's problem has been solved. The problem of the consumer has already been solved. The consumer is fine because they're watching Succession. The theater structurally favored blockbusters, the uniform ticket price, the opening weekend revenue model, the exhibitor incentive to allocate screens to guarantee demand. All of these biased the theatrical channel against the mid-budget film from the beginning. The format was never as secure as its cultural prominence suggested. Television quality evolved from zero to genuinely great storytelling within 1 decade. The premium cable model removed the episodic reset constraints. What emerged was a format capable of doing, across 80 hours, what the mid-budget film had been doing in 2, and also doing it with structural advantages that film cannot replicate. Prestige television solved the same consumer problem that mid-budget film was solving, with a higher runtime, with a lower risk, with better economics, with higher convenience, and the lack of an opening weekend death clock. On every dimension that mattered to the consumer who wanted serious adult narrative fiction, the new format was the superior solution. The mid-budget film is not missing, it has become a television season. And nobody who actually watched those films noticed that they were gone. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. Be a member, pay me, thank you, and I'll see you guys next time.